Well, welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt. With me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, before I ask you, since I already know, I'll just break out. I was really bad while I was on vacation. I had many drinks, so it's just water with lemon, but in my Inside BBI glass. So there we go. What do you have, my friend?
I have Honor Brewing Classic Premium Lager. It has little military boots on it in honor of my son. So that's what I'm drinking.
Nice. Well done.
Who's on his way back to Fort Bragg right now as we speak. So
very cool. My son is, I guess he's going to be going at the end of September. He's in Japan right now. We'll be going out to, is it Lemoore or Lenore? I always get it wrong. California. So he'll be based in California. So we'll actually be able to see him for about a year. I think he's going to be, he was on the Reagan. He was on the Washington. I'm trying to remember what aircraft carrier is being moved to after that, but whatever that, they're going to bring him here. He'll be in California for a while. And then my son, Zayden, one of the triplets, at the moment, his plan is to go into the Air Force, but we might be rethinking that one to also go to the Navy, but I'll keep you updated. So military in our families, for sure. So with that, we got a lot going on, Eric. We have a lot to talk about. The Giants finally formalized their entire coaching staff. We're going to get to that in a minute. But let's talk about, as you have been very big on sharing on X, saw it all over, the seismic change with the way the Giants are structured. It's not hyperbole to say that. This is a massive change for them.
No, it's gigantic, and it's bigger than look, you and I kind of thought it was going in this direction, but some of this might have been like sort of wish casting, sort of like, but Ian O'Connor, who writes for The Athletic, and as I pointed out in an article that I put up this afternoon, has been intimately plugged in with John Harbaugh ever since he got fired from the Ravens. It's been really cool. It's been sort of like an inside reporter giving us what's going on. And those who were on X and Twitter from the beginning knew that Ian O'Connor was the one to follow to see if it was really a realistic possibility that John Harbaugh would become the next head coach of the Giants. I think a lot of us, we've gotten so beaten down and worn down. We were like, oh, please let us get John Harbaugh. But it's not going to work out because nothing works out for us anymore as Giants fans. Well, it did. And it was Ian O'Connor who I think was keeping everybody's hopes up, saying this is going to happen. He wants to come here. So Ian's been plugged in with him. We've had other reporters tell us, including Connor Hughes, that they've singled out Ian and saying he is plugged in there. He's talking directly not only to John Harbaugh, he's talking directly to Chris Mara. And he was, he didn't come out and say it, but you can tell that, that's an envious spot to be in for any reporter, that the two sides he's got, he's tied to directly. He's not hearing from somebody else. He's talking to the actual people. And so Ian sat down with John Harbaugh again and had a sort of 30-day review of his first month with the Giants. And there were bombshells in this. And again, I know some people are saying, Eric, these aren't bombshells. Number one, I think some people aren't accepting or fully understanding what the bombshells are. And number two, there are people still arguing out there that this doesn't mean that much. And it's gigantic. It really is gigantic. The entire structure of the way this team has operated since 1979, at least 1979, is completely different now. And what we learned from John Harbaugh, the most important thing through Ian O'Connor, was on Saturday at 3:15, he still did not know if he was going to be the Giants' next head coach until John Mara said, okay, we're going to give you ultimate authority here. And he was prepared to walk away from the New York Giants on Saturday after we were waiting for him, and we were told by many other people that this was just procedural. Oh, they're just finishing the contract. There's no big deal. It's not a big deal. Gary Myers was wrong about that. We had Gary on. And again, Gary, I was a good interview with him, but I thought he was wrong about that, and he was wrong about that. This could have been ended on Saturday. And as I argued in the article, I think consciously, or it was either deliberately or just by chance, John Harbaugh boxed John Mara into a corner, because can you imagine if it had come out on Saturday that John Harbaugh's not coming here because they don't want to surrender Joe Schoen's power? That, can you imagine what the fan base would have done? We would have flipped out. I mean, 14 years of losing is one thing, but to put this on top of all of that, I can't even imagine the uproar that would happen. And even John Mara had to realize that. So I think they were sort of painted into a corner at that point. And I don't know if that was a deliberate strategy on John Harbaugh's part to get to that spot, or it just worked out that way. But there's no way in my mind John Mara could have said, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that, because the uproar would have been so enormous at that point. I can't even imagine what the public relations disaster that would have been for the team. I mean, that's my take. Don't you? I mean, remember, you got to go back to where we were on Wednesday night. He's coming here, and then we're waiting Thursday, Friday, and most of Saturday. What's the delay? Why is this taking so long?
Yeah, I think some of it though is less about Joe Schoen. Amazingly enough, I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is the Tim McDonald, the Chris Mara, just that structure that they had, the Abrams, that all that piece there too, because that's the part that Harbaugh, by reporting directly to ownership, Schoen becomes a non-factor to Harbaugh. But to have final say on everything's a different story. To have somebody else who's in Abrams' position reporting to him instead of the GM, that really says to me, you're also letting, so if there was a butting of heads, if I have to go through the GM, then basically ownership comes in and they sit down with both of us, right? They look at it and they're like, okay, this way, there is no both of us. There is, ownership is going to sit down with me and I'm going, I said this and this is what we're going with. And they're like, okay, that's the position it's in. Dawn Aponte coming on board, she's now controlling a lot of the stuff that Abrams did, which includes the contracts, looking at how the roster is structured, the kind of people you want to go and get. That stuff goes through Harbaugh. So you've basically took some of what McDonald and those guys, where they got to kind of, I don't want to say chirp, that's kind of rude, but where they got to be in the ear of Joe Schoen and they got to talk and Shane's talking to them, and then that goes back to the Maras. None of that stuff's happening anymore. That stuff's going through John Harbaugh and then to the Maras. So I think, yes, I think it's Shane's a little bit, but I think it's the rest of the Mara crew and some of the other management piece that basically has been told, you guys are kind of just there to do jobs, but you're not in charge of anything.
Yeah, and you may be right. That's the part I don't know yet. But what's fascinating too is, again, remember when Dawn Aponte was hired, I pointed out that she had a connection with Joe Schoen because of the time they spent together in Miami. And I thought, I said, maybe I'm overestimating the demise of Joe Schoen a little bit, because maybe he had something to do with her being here. Well, nope, because Harbaugh told Ian O'Connor, Dawn's here because of me, and she reports to me. So it's just a coincidence, it appears now, that Schoen and her work together. Look, it doesn't hurt that they've worked together. But again, once again, that Dawn is now reporting to Harbaugh instead of to Schoen, then to Harbaugh. So some people are going to say, what difference does it make? It makes a big, it makes a big difference. If anyone's worked in large organizations and who has access to the higher ups, it matters. And who has, those people can actually, I don't know how to say this without making it sound terrible. The people who have access to levers of power can manipulate the information that gets to those decision makers.
Sure.
So in other words, if you're like the gatekeeper, you can sort of control the information that the ultimate, your boss sees it in the end. Again, I know people are going to say, whoa, this is sounding too much like Game of Thrones or something. Again, look, most of the time, these people are going to be working well together. It's going to be collaborative. They are going to work together. But as I pointed out, and you have pointed out, and other people have pointed out, differences do occur. George Young and Bill Parcells did not get along. Dan Reeves sort of bamboozled George Young into saying he could play nice, but that didn't last very long. And those two did not get along. I suspect Tom Coughlin had his run-ins with both Reese and Gettleman at times because he's such a strong person. And the way the structure has always worked, and Milton said, and I vehemently disagree with this, Milton said, oh, come on, everyone knows Coughlin had more say than Reese when he was here. That's not the way it worked with the Giants. Reese had ultimate authority over Tom Coughlin, and that's confirmed by even Chris Mara's comments at the press conference for Harbaugh, that he was like, look, we haven't done it this way, and this is new for us, and this is going to be new for us. He admitted it. So this is a brand new structure for the Giants, for better or worse. I think it's better in this sense because it's not so much that the old structure could not work. It's the people that they had working within that structure were incompetent. And I hate to use that word, but the record speaks for itself. For the last 14 years, the people that worked within the old structure could not get the job done. Hence the record of the New York Football Giants in the last 14 years and the status of the roster and the win-loss record. That it's just, look, football is a bottom line business. The Giants have sucked for 14 years here with a couple of exceptions and where they made a blip and, they get a playoff run, but that quickly went out the window. So this is gigantic in the sense that now everything, for better or worse, is going through Harbaugh. And in a way, if Pat Leonard's correct, and this is a big if, Leonard retweeted the Ian O'Connor article and said that it's not just Dawn Aponte who's reporting directly to Harbaugh, but other departments are reporting to Dawn now rather than the Joe Schoen. Now we don't have the confirmation of that. It's coming from Pat Leonard, who everyone's got different opinions of Pat Leonard, so we don't know. But if that is true, which is a big if, then in my opinion, as in Pat's opinion, Joe Schoen's been largely relegated to sort of a director of college scouting role right now, maybe pro personnel too. We have to see about that. But that may not be a bad thing for Joe Schoen because that may be his wheelhouse, and maybe that's a better thing for him. But if that's true, and people are going to take this the wrong way, he's easier to fire and get rid of now because he's not like the guy anymore. He's not like you're thinking, oh my God, we're getting rid of the general manager or we're getting rid of the director of football operations. You're just getting rid of like a Mark Ross figure or Chris Pettit, if you remember those two guys. Those were directors of college. So it's that kind of thing. So I think it's 50-50 right now if Joe Schoen survives. I think if they get along well, the draft goes well, there's cooperation, and John Harbaugh thinks that they can work together, he stays. But if John Harbaugh has somebody else in mind that he thinks maybe from someone from the Ravens or maybe another organization that would be better, I don't think it's definite that Joe Schoen even survives any of this. And I know people are saying, well, that's because, Eric, you hate Joe Schoen. I don't hate Joe Schoen. I'm just saying he's lucky as hell to still have a job here because he's responsible for the same thing that Brian Daboll was the last 4 years of this mess. Sure. Sorry.
No, you're
I've got a lot to say.
Totally on board with it. You know what's interesting, and I don't know if you remember when it came out. And I want to say it was Schefter. It was one of the national guys. After the Giants said Joe Schoen would be coming back, so this is immediately after the season, there were a couple of times people kind of put out there, and I thought it was Schefter was one of them, that said, well, Joe Schoen's definitely going to be here at least through the draft.
Yeah.
And I thought it was odd that they included that at the time, considering they just said he was coming back. They didn't have a coach. You didn't know what it was going to be. Right. I got a weird feeling that in many ways he has been completely pushed to the side. They've been very nice about it. Ian O'Connor said on that show that they did the interview on, I apologize to those guys. Right. I actually had never heard of them before, so I can't even remember to say.
No, I didn't either. It popped up in my feed. Yeah.
But what he said was Joe Schoen and John Harbaugh. Harbaugh has the final say, but it shouldn't come to loggerheads at draft night, that they don't ever expect it to. The question was then posed back to Ian again. If that is the case, then why did John Harbaugh need that power? Well, there's a couple things. Easy answer to that one for me is you can't ask for the power after the situation's already started. You need to have it up front. It doesn't mean I'm walking in and I'm wielding it with the first person who's making coffee and the person who's sweeping the floors and the person who's doing this. However, what it does say is, yeah, we'll get along, and maybe they do. Maybe they like each other a little bit in conversation or whatever. But I'm going to tell you the vision that I have for this team. We're now going to go after players that fit that vision. I might not go in the second round, it's this guy, but I'm going to give you a range of guys, and they need to fit this thing. And if you come to me and go, it's this, and I go, it's the answer to that is, That's where we're at. I suspect that this idea that they won't bump heads is because if you already know the guy who's telling you what he wants is the guy who's going to decide it, then there is no argument come draft night. The only thing that I can see, and the thing I pointed out multiple times before, Joe Schoen's very good about laying out the draft as far as other teams go, where things might happen or not happen. He really did play the first round of last year's draft pretty well. For all the people and optimists, I'm a huge fan, a big fan, love you. But I do think that Brian Daboll gets way too much credit about Jaxson Dart. And the reason being is this. He wanted Cam Ward. Giants could not get up to Cam Ward. I suspect that Brian Daboll, if he had his druthers, would have taken Dart at 3, which means you don't get Abdul Carter at 3. The Giants got Abdul Carter and still got Jaxson Dart. So Joe Schoen did play that well, and he did not overplay. Now, you and I and everybody else were kind of going, oh, shit. The Saints, the Steelers, all those guys are going to draft for the Giants. There's not going to be a quarterback unless they really pull somebody from a couple of rounds later into the first round, or they give up a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't want them to give up for next year. Ultimately, he barely gave up anything to make that move. So I think you got to give him some credit there. And I think his wheelhouse is that, but John Harbaugh runs the show.
Well, and you also have to give him credit for this. He has been willing to do what the coaches want to do, which is, as Ian O'Connor pointed out, and but you and I pointed out earlier, is probably something John Harbaugh noticed in that, look, whether you like Joe Schoen or not, he did draft guys that his coaches wanted them to draft. So that's also probably been noticed by John Harbaugh, and that's what Ian O'Connor said. So I suspect they've talked about this as well too. So that helps too. The what it comes down to me now is, does John Harbaugh think Joe Schoen can scout? And does he think the team that he put together in the scouting department, can they scout? And I mean that at the pro personnel level and at the collegiate level. And that I don't know, and we're going to have to find out. And no changes are going to happen until after the draft. There may not be any changes. I suspect there will be some. It just depends on how dramatic they're going to be and whether he'll be able to get some people from the Baltimore Ravens establishment. No, look, we all know this. Anyone who follows football knows that the Baltimore Ravens know how to draft. They've been one of those teams that you point to as, my goodness, they always seem to draft well year after year after year. So if we can get a fresh voice, even just if it's a scout from them, that would be great. And that's what I'm going to be curious. But we won't know any about that until after, early May. The draft is around, I think, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, somewhere there.
Yes.
And then we'll find out in May if there's going to be any changes. And that's when all teams make their changes, because again, they're bored. These people know too much, and they just don't make these changes until then. So Schoen deserves credit for a lot of things, and he may survive. But it could be, and I don't mean this as people are saying this where you're being mean. I don't mean this as mean. He's been marginalized, and there's no way that you can follow the situation at this point and not see that unless you're completely blind to the situation. So that doesn't mean he doesn't have a role. That doesn't mean he doesn't have input, but he's been really lowered. And as somebody brought up today on the website, which was a great point, which I didn't even think about, if he's been really lowered, Brandon Brown has got to be thinking, I got to get out of here at some point, unless Brandon Brown's one of the guys they think Joe, replaces Joe Schoen or something. But at this point, what is Brandon Brown even doing? What's his role on this team? Super scout maybe. But if I'm Brandon, I'm probably saying, can I get out of here? Because I want to make a name for myself someplace else at this point. That's somebody brought that. And I don't want to take credit for that, but it was a great point, I thought.
I think I'm going to say this. I have zero proof about what I'm about to say, but I think you can piece together some things the way it laid out last year. One of the things that slipped out in the draft process and then draft night was this concept that the Giants were all in on Shedeur Sanders. And the Giants made it look like they were, whether that was intentional misdirection, I'm not so sure about. I wonder if Brandon Brown, who was the one who spent a lot of time at Colorado, went to a number of their practices, was meeting with Dion, was meeting with Shedeur. I'm wondering if internally, like maybe there was some talk of like, no, you're our guy. We're interested in you coming from Brandon, and maybe that was the Giants' way of like sending smoke signals the wrong way, or it could have just been incompetence of the office where people were kind of doing rogue stuff of like over speaking where they were at or promising things they really couldn't do. If you look back on it, the Giants seem now you don't see it at the moment, and maybe it's fandom that blinds us at the time, but it's not just that they were bad at jobs. They literally, it does come off as it was like a bunch of people doing individual things. That's the one part that I think is way different now with John Harbaugh. There's a system. There's a thing in play that he wants. There's the way he wants to play, and it's not coming up with a dumbass acronym that goes smart, tough, dependable, and all of a sudden, all I got to do is say it. If you say it, you're it. This is what we want to do, and I think some of the stuff is really going to show. It's going to show what Shane's involvement is. It's going to show how much gravitas that Harbaugh brings to these decision-making pieces over the next couple of weeks. Free agency starts. The tampering window starts on March 9th at noon.
Right.
A lot of stuff happens at the combine. That's next week. So I think you're going to start hearing some things coming out. Are the Giants going to trade some guys? And I know there's some specific ones we can talk about in a few minutes, how that might play out. Who are the Giants interested in free agent wise? Is there any trades coming to the Giants that they might be interested in? All that stuff is going to play out because, again, there's still some big pieces, and now we're going to see who's making those calls. Dawn Aponte, I'm assuming, is going to play a big role on the cap side of things for sure.
Oh yeah, she's the cap.
Her background.
The Giants even have announced that she's the cap person now.
Not the crazy cat person. She is the cap person.
Yeah, cap.
Yes.
Cap person. She does more than that, but she's in charge of the cap, and that's her background, and that's her. Yes. That's her wheelhouse. So, and she knows what all 32 teams have been doing, as we brought up in another episode. So that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Here's a question. I meant to grab the chat with my laptop. Sometimes it's not so easy to grab the one to throw it up there as fast as I wanted to, and now it's gone.
If you want me to grab something, let me know.
It goes further back. So I apologize. I can't remember the name of the person who did it, but I saw what you wrote. The question was that the comment was there was a rumor maybe that the NFL pushed Aponte to the Giants in kind of a George Young kind of way to dysfunction. I don't know that that's true, but I want to ask you this, though. Do you think John Harbaugh's idea about I want to bring that person might also be tied to some of the things we talked about with John Mara's medical condition, the possibility that internally the Giants didn't know who the hell, thank you, Neil, didn't know who the hell might actually run the whole show if something happens to John. You bring in somebody who comes from the NFL executive offices. She can definitely work with Harbaugh. She's got a lot of experience with a lot of other stuff and running, multiple levels of things. Could that possibly be another reason why John's like, I want to bring in that person. I want that person reporting to me, because if something happens, we need to keep this internal structure. And it's a lot harder to do if something happens to John and all the little minions who were there before now get their kind of say, and everybody's trying to play, who's going to run the ship. Now you've got two people, one a veteran NFL office person and one a veteran NFL coach to kind of take over if things go sideways.
Look, we asked Gary Myers, I think it was Gary, if Dawn was brought here because of what John Harbaugh wanted. And I think he said no. And you and I, our response after he was on here was we're not buying that. It's too
Right.
coincidental that a few days after John Harbaugh is made the head coach, Kevin Abrams, who's been here for decades as the cap guy, is let go. That's too coincidental. Again, Ian O'Connor talks to John Harbaugh for this Athletic article, and he says she's here because of me. So there it is. I mean, from the horse's mouth himself. So she's here. Kevin Abrams is out because John Harbaugh. Now, look, John Harbaugh's got a bit of a Machiavellian streak in him. I said that today in one of the threads, and I really mean that now. He comes across, and people are going to say that, oh, that's me. Again, it's actually, it's a compliment on his part, because you have to have a little bit of a devious nature. This is a big boys game. This is serious. It's not life or death war or anything like that, but this is big business. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. It's a cutthroat business. You better have a bit of an edge to you. And he comes out and he's like, with everybody else, smile on his face, and no, it doesn't matter who has the final say. Too much is being made out of that. We're all going to collaborate. This is going to be fine. But then for whatever reason, he feels he's safe to talk to Ian O'Connor and basically say, no, I'm in charge. I got it in writing, and I brought this person in. Again, that explains why Kevin's out of here. So he's playing it both sides. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth here. He's trying to basically say, I didn't do it. Don't worry about it. But then he sits down with Ian and he's saying, yeah, I did it. So we know Dawn is here because of him. So he told Ian. Now, unless you think Ian's a liar, and I think you'd be hard pressed to say he's a liar at this point, because he's been on top of all of this from the very beginning. What I find is what's curious is John Harbaugh wants to tell everybody else one story, but when he'll sit down with Ian, he'll let the filter go away and he'll tell the truth. He'll say,
I was going to ask you that part. Well, two things. One, Ian, could Ian lie? Sure. But normally you lie about stuff that the other person's not going to come out and say that it's a lie, because they don't even want to talk about the fact that they've been talking to you. So they just ignore it. This has been very clear that Ian and John have been talking all along during this entire thing. Are you surprised at how open John is being with Ian? Because I'm a little surprised at that too. Yeah,
because why? So part of me, again, this is the conspiracy theory part of Eric here. We should have something that comes up, conspiracy theory section of Inside BBI.
Who wants to sponsor that? Step up.
The conspiracy theory part of me says John Harbaugh is doing that to get a message out, that he's laying a marker here. So, because why else would he want to advertise any of this? Some people, again, like Milton today, would say, well, we didn't hear about anything like this with Tom Coughlin. Well, Tom Coughlin hated the press, and he wouldn't want to air his dirty laundry.
Right.
There was a really good interview. There were two awesome interviews John Harbaugh gave last week. I don't know if anyone noticed this, but when John was picking the coaches, which we're going to get into in a second, when he was picking the coaching staff, he was in bunker mode, and we didn't hear a peep out of him. And as soon as that was done, he went on like 5, 6, or 7 interviews. They kept popping up in my YouTube feed, even with people that I've never even known. But he did it with Baltimore people, and he did it with New York people. And he did the two best interviews I saw were the Francesca interview and the Brian Kilmeade interview. If you haven't seen both of them, they're both really good interviews. And one's like 25 minutes and one's like 30 minutes. But they're really worth watching. And it was interesting listening to Harbaugh just talk about when he let his hair down, he was being honest about how some of this stuff went down and how his philosophy on football is. And I think there are certain people he just feels more comfortable talking to than other people. So I think when he's the generic press, or he's not sure who the interviewer is, you might hear more BS. But then
Right.
when he feels like he's comfortable with the person that he's talking to him, he's more honest with that person. And I thought the Kilmeade and the Francesca, both those interviews, I thought he was being more honest. There were a couple, he said in one of the interviews, and it might not even been one of these two, that the Monken thing really screwed them up. I mean, and you don't normally hear that from a coach. You know what I mean? They'll say, no, but he was like, yeah, we were counting on him coming here. So, and we'll probably get into that in a second.
Can you imagine though what that actually says? That says to me, right? Like, even though I like the guy and I want him to come with me, I never thought a team would give him a head coaching job.
Right.
That's, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's how surprising what Cleveland did, caught everybody off guard. I mean, Monken he wasn't a household name to be a head coach. And that, I could see why he would say that's surprising. I'm just surprised he would say it out loud. Because if I'm hearing it, I'm going, wait, dude, you never thought I could get a head coaching job?
I think he thought because of his age, and I thought he looked at the landscape. And again, the word out of Cleveland was he wasn't getting the job, that the owner intervened, like the Shedeur Sanders. By the way, before you knock Brandon Brown on Shedeur Sanders, remember Shedeur Sanders is a Pro Bowl quarterback. But the owner intervened in that situation. And I guess the owner intervened in Tennessee too, because it looked like Nagy was going to get the Tennessee job. And it sounds like the owner intervened there, that the front office people wanted Nagy as the head coach of the Titans. And the owner wanted Saleh there. So that's what I read. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I read.
Crazy owners thinking they could just do whatever they want.
No,
they own the team.
No, and they might end up being right. We'll have to see. But I think the owners this cycle have intervened more than at least I've seen before. Maybe they do all the time, but it looks like they did.
It's just a sidebar real quick here. Isn't it strange? Or for me, it is. I'm asking you, does it feel strange to you? The season just ended,
right?
Really. And I know the Super Bowl just happened, but we are legit less than 3 weeks away. It's just barely 2 weeks, 6 days, 2 weeks, 6 days away from the start of free agency and moving. I mean, this offseason with so many coaches changing teams, so many things happening, there hasn't been a lull or dead period at all. In fact, this is old school MLB hot stove league kind of stuff, back when free agency seemed to be a frenzy early on. Now I don't even know when the hell it starts or ends in baseball, but it's been crazy weird of just how much has gone by here. The Giants are deep into the next phases for sure. I mean, I know we just heard who all the coaches are. They've been working that, but they're already looking ahead. So to wrap this part of it up, is there anything else about the Harbaugh situation for you that you want to bring up? For me, I'm just going to say that the Ian O'Connor thing to me continues to stand out a bit. It was fine when Harbaugh left the Ravens and is looking for a job and they have a connection in their talk. Since he's been hired, though, that conduit of information has continued to stay open. And I'm a little surprised that, and how long that continues to go. Maybe it's just because we're still trying to create a new feeling in New York, a change in all that. So maybe that's why Harbaugh's being so open. But I am surprised at the level that he is.
Yeah, I am too. But I also get back to the conspiracy part of it being maybe there's a battle still underway going on in the Giants structure. Again, this is going to be really uncomfortable for a lot of people, and maybe this is a way that he still, even though he has the contract that says he has these things, that he also has to sort of publicly let everyone put on notice. I'm calling the shots here still, and I'm going to let Ian O'Connor let people know that I'm still calling the shots. Because otherwise, why are you he doesn't need to advertise. He's not one of these guys that needs to puff out his chest and brag.
Right.
So I think there's probably a method behind the madness. And again, I suspect, I start to wonder, is his team the one who leaked on Wednesday night that he was going to be the next head coach of the New York Giants before he actually was the head coach of the New York Giants? Did he put John Mara back on his heels with that? because as of Saturday, it hadn't still been official. And John basically had to say, okay, we're going to change the way that we've done business here. So I still wonder if he's a little bit more of a strategist. Maybe it's all coincidence. Maybe it's all like it just worked out this way. Remember I said all from the beginning that the heavens opened up and gave us John Harbaugh, that we needed somebody to come in here with this kind of gravitas. And one other thing before the line point. I brought this up in the article. The alternative here would have been Joe Schoen remaining in ultimate authority on this team for one more year with Stefanski as the head coach. And if the Giants don't have a good year, you and I felt that he was on the hot seat anyways. So if the Giants have another 4 or 5 win season in 2026 with Joe Schoen as the GM, with Stefanski as the coach, I don't see Schoen surviving, and maybe Stefanski doesn't survive. And then you get into that situation again. Do you fire the coach? Do you fire the GM and keep the coach kind of crap, or do you have to clean house again? And the Giants have been terrible at cleaning house all together at once and all that mess. So we came that close to that kind of shitty situation. That's what I mean. Like, Harbaugh is the only personality out there that could have forced the Giants' hand. Get rid of Kevin Abrams, bring in Dawn Aponte, have control over final say on personnel issues, have the whole new structure redone. He's the only one who could have come in here and done that. No other person out there could have done it. And the fact that he wanted to come here, I said from the beginning, and I think you did too, is like, oh my goodness, we finally caught a break. And I think maybe some of this may be still part of that we're finally getting some good luck, or it might be Harbaugh's so good at maneuvering the Maras right now that maybe he's playing 4D chess.
So what you're saying is we have Harbaugh Schoen combo, but really it's Harbaugh Aponte and Shane's kind of whatever he's doing kind of thing. Or we could have had a Schoen Stefanski, which would be like the Coy and Vance Duke version. Instead of getting Bo and Luke, we would have gotten Coy and Vance for that season when their contracts were up and they're having a little bit of a problem. That's where we could have been.
Would you be terribly excited right now if Schoen was back and Stefanski was the head coach? Would you be? Would you be as excited?
Oh God, no.
Right. I mean, let's be honest, right? You'd be hopeful. We'd be like, maybe let's hope we got the right coach this time. We've got 4 coaches in a wrong way. John Mara's hired 4 coaches in a row that have been wrong. Maybe he got it right this time. That's how I kind of would have been, or like this seismic change that we got right now. I mean,
well, and I think there's 2 things to bring up. Ian O'Connor mentioned, and it's something that, and you can go back, and I got to find the episode for it because I remember when we were talking about it, and I mentioned at that time, hey, down the road, there might be this guy available, and it was John Harbaugh. And I said, why? There was some rumors that there was stuff with Lamar Jackson, things like that. And that was way early on. I think it was October, early November. I'm wondering the reverse of what you're thinking that Wednesday night, if the Giants didn't kind of leak it out a little ahead of time, but they hadn't signed off on the pieces that Harbaugh said needed to be signed off on. Because then that makes it more sense when all of a sudden that next day, what do we start hearing? He's the coach. Well, hold on a minute. It's not signed yet. Tennessee is still in play. Now, all of a sudden, Tennessee was back in play. But when you listen to Ian O'Connor talk, who did he say that John Harbaugh was thinking about before he was even fired? The New York Giants were on the top of his list, that if he were to be fired, that's where he wanted to go. This seems to be something that behind the scenes, the Giants knew a little bit, that if he was available, he would want to come there, that he had let it out, that if I am available, I want to go there. And they finally got that piece done. The difference, the seismic difference from your article earlier for me on the Stefanski to Harbaugh thing is this. Stefanski becomes just another coach hire. He was another head coach, yes, but he's just another coach hire that we're hoping God, hopefully it'll be better. But again, he would
We
only
hope
be,
it's going to work out this time.
yeah,
you know?
but he would only be this much better than Pat Shurmur, who was a previous head coach who had a losing record. Stefanski had won some stuff, but he still had a number of bad teams, and you can blame it on the organization, but at the same time, that organization over the last 15 years isn't any more poorly run than the Giants have been. So
Right.
this is different because when he comes in, it brings that whole wave of I bring success with me. I'm not hoping to achieve success. I bring it with me and an expectation that we will succeed, not
We
a
will
hope
succeed.
that we succeed.
John Harbaugh's message is we're going to succeed. It's not a matter.
Right.
And what we'll have to see if it is, but he's coming in here and he's not like, and like you brought up in another podcast, it's not like he's shy. He doesn't shy away from predicting we're going to do well. You know, it's not like, well, we'll have to see. No. He said, we're not afraid of the NFC East. We're going to compete and we're going to do well. And again, people shouldn't expect them to go to the Super Bowl this year, but it's a competency. There's an adult in the room right now. And I think there are a lot of Giants fans that are either too young or have been too beaten down by what has happened to this team to not recognize what competency looks like anymore. And that's why we get posts and arguments for people saying, well, so-and-so really wasn't so bad as a player or as a general manager or a coach. And like I made the joke earlier in the week, I said Giants fans are suffering from Stockholm syndrome in some cases here because it's like, it's okay to admit that you're in an abusive relationship with your team when your team doesn't know what they're doing. And the Giants have not known what they're doing the last 14 years. And John Harbaugh is coming in here and we'll have to see, but he's clearly already starting to say, yeah, I'm going to fix this. I thought there was a really interesting comment he made in one of his interviews. And again, I don't know if it was the Francesco one or the Kilmeade one, where he said, I know it hasn't, I'm paraphrasing here. It hasn't worked here for the Giants. And we're going to take a deep dive and find out why it hasn't worked here. And there are some things that you can even see they're minor things, but they're going to make people uncomfortable. There was a really good interview, if people haven't seen it, with John Schmelk talking to one of the Ravens PR department guys this week. It was this week. So if you go back and look at it, and they were talking about the Ravens coaches and we're going to get into that. I promise John and I are going to talk about the coaching staff. The Ravens coaches that followed John Harbaugh here. Schmelk wanted to ask him about those coaches. And one of the things that came up was, and this was a passing comment towards the end, was that John Harbaugh has taken a deep dive into why injuries are on the upswing in the NFL, including on the Ravens for a few years. And one of the things that they've done is moved practices in training camp and during the regular season to the afternoon. Now, John Schmelk did not like that, and I immediately had the same reaction as him because Schmelk and I are kind of in the same type of thing. We update websites, we update the public, and I turned to my wife and said, well, that means I'm going to be working late now because they're not going to get their practices in until late in the afternoon, and I'm going to have to work through dinner and stuff like that. Schmelk was the same way. He was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to tell my wife about this. So why I'm bringing this up is there are even minor things that the Giants are going to change. They're not minor to the team. They're minor to fans, but they're going to start having like a training camp practice is going to be like at 2:00 in the afternoon. It's going to start. And that's going to ruffle feathers within the building of people who have been accustomed of doing things a certain way. And why they changed it is they studied it and they found out that the players needed more recovery time between practices and to get another good meal in them. And that's why they do practices. So John Schmelk was on there going, wait, do they continue this through the regular season too? It's not just training camp. And he said, yeah. And John was like, oh God. But that's the kind of thing. The changes are going to be somewhat uncomfortable for people in that building because he's going to have a new way of doing things. And I know that's a minor thing, but it's the type of thing that I'm talking about, just things here and there that are going to add up, and it's good that they're going to be uncomfortable because the things that they've been doing haven't been working. Anyways, sorry to go off on that, but
no.
that's the type of thing I'm talking about.
There's a lot of things. My day job background is sales, and it's in the software world. There's a lot of software stuff that you don't that happens behind the scenes that you never see. Updates get done all the time, and you're just looking at it, you would never know what it is, but it's critical to the function of the program or whatever that you have. But the user would never notice going through it where that update was, what it actually did. And so it's this kind of stuff. It's some of the smaller things that it leaks out, and you're like, it's not a big deal. But it is kind of a big deal if they feel that this is the way things are. And by the way, like you just said, though, right? This is also another way to put your stamp on a situation that says the country club attitude that was here before, the way it was, isn't happening. We're going to do things the way I want. This is better for you. But in the beginning, nobody likes change when it comes to routine. When you're used to a routine, you don't like it to be changed.
Right.
So when someone new comes in and he sets that pace, that's now saying, this is the way things are run. It's my way. We're going to do it this way. And then you give the benefits why, but people are going to have to see it. So I'm all for some of these changes. It is going to be interesting to see, though, does it actually then, do you see the result on the field in terms of injuries have been the biggest one for us? I mean, the Giants have been crippled at positions every year.
Well, there was another good point that this Ravens guy brought up. He said, and John Schmelk said, oh my God, that's like Tom Coughlin, which is a good thing. He said that John Harbaugh has these intense conditioning tests at the beginning of training camp. And if you don't pass the conditioning test, you don't practice. And these tests are not easy. And he was basically saying the veterans know what they have to do and come in there and they're prepared because they know how hard this is. But if you're a rookie or you're from another team and you come in here, a lot of these players don't pass at first. And the Ravens guy said one of the reasons why the Ravens are so good, have been so good, not recently, they had some issues the past year, but they've been so good in September, is he felt that they were better conditioned teams than other teams coming out of training camp. And you and I have talked about this before with the country club atmosphere under not just Brian Dable, but other predecessors, that the Giants weren't ready to start the season in September.
Right.
So again, we've got a coach that seems to realize the training camp is supposed to get you ready for football in September. So I suspect, and I don't want to get people's hopes up, that the 2026 New York Giants are going to do well in the month of September because we're going to be a better conditioned football team than the opponents we play. Finally, that's what I suspect. Unless we're going to start off with, again, like playing the world champions on opening day or something, which I hope we don't. But like we have to play Seahawks on like opening day.
Well,
but I suspect there's a chance we'll actually do well in September for once this year.
I think you could take Seattle off the list if everything we've heard is true. The Giants have petitioned to have a home game for the first game of the season. They did open on the road in the first 2 games. Yeah, Gary Myers has said the Giants have petitioned because this is their 40th anniversary of the '86 Super Bowl team. They want to have the home game on the first because they played the first two on the road last year. So we'll see. There's a lot of question and wondering if the Giants will open the season, the 40th anniversary of the '86 team with the Dallas Cowboys, the same team they opened with in '86 on the road, but they lost that game. It was a Monday night game. So we'll see how that all that plays out. But they have petitioned to have the home game.
There's no Herschel Walker in that game game this year.
And speaking of like, coming out of there not ready, the Giants defense, I think Taylor he missed most of training camp. Joe Morris wasn't even there at that point.
That was a bad game. I mean,
they were gassed at the end of that game.
They were Lawrence Taylor admits it. They were gassed at the end of the game. All right, let's get to the coaches. Yeah, I have a ton of stuff on the coaches. All right, so you want to start out on offense?
Yeah, let's just go right down through. Start with the offensive coordinator.
Okay, so the most fascinating thing to me, you and I have talked about Nagy already, the pros and the cons and all of this. Big picture is this, and we'll dive down into the lower thing. Is I've been taking a deeper dive into Greg Roman, deeper dive into Bloomgren, the offensive line coach, deeper dive into Callahan, who is the quarterback's coach, but he's also the passing game coordinator now. And we're assuming Roman's going to be the run game coordinator, even though that wasn't his title. His title was like senior offensive consultant, or let me pull that up real quick. I should know this. Senior offensive assistant is Greg Roman. I think most of us are assuming he's going to be basically the de facto run game coordinator. And then passing game coordinator, quarterback's coach is Brian Callahan. And then Matt Nagy's the offensive coordinator. What's interesting to me is that Callahan and Nagy come from more pass first systems. One is the Shanahan system, which is Callahan, and one is the Andy Reid system, which is Nagy. And more West Coast, make it comfortable for the quarterback, easy read, spread out. But both the offensive line coach and Greg Roman are power, diverse scheme, running game, power guys. They'll do gap, power gap systems. They'll do wide zone systems, and they make it confusing. One of the reasons why they're so good with the run game is they confuse the other team, but they're all on board with not just sort of manipulating and position blocking, but blowing people off the line of scrimmage, more power football kind of things. So what I find interesting is we've got two completely different style of coaches, and how do those two mesh? And I hope people aren't immediately thinking, oh my God, this can't work. But I am curious to see how it can work myself, because they are very different. So the good news is this: you got two real guys that are really good at West Coast passing, getting guys open and making it easy for Jaxson Dart to find the open guy. It won't have to be confusing. They'll spread people out and make it an easy read for him. But they've been known to be more pass first guys. But on the flip side, you've got the power guys too. And how do those two mesh together? And we'll get into the particulars, but that was my overall. I'm curious to see what you thought about just how these four guys will mesh together.
Well, I think it's pretty interesting the way that you kind of laid it out right there. I think it's a good bit of information you shared. One thing that I kind of get a feeling is that Nagy is going to be the best friend to Dart during game day. Mm-hmm. And it's hard if the offensive coordinator is solely focused on the quarterback to get the message when you're in between series, offensive series. But if you have the other folks there who have that experience as well, they can deal with some of the other aspects of the team. There's also, I don't want to say schizophrenic way of thinking about it, but when you had Daniel Jones, the Giants had a kind of a similar running quarterback, right? They had a running quarterback, but he brought a much different game than a Jaxson Dart. His runs were very, I run here. He's not a nifty guy. He wasn't making stuff up during the play itself. He wasn't, just an on-the-fly athletic guy. It was, if you called a run play, they ran it. If he could drop back and then just kind of run away, he could run away. He's not dancing around making plays. That's not how it works. Dart is. I need a coach, though, that can talk to me a lot about what's going on during the game. I got to be able to do that, but then that alienates a lot of other things. And I think that's where Greg Roman, especially when you're change the way you play offense. I would assume we're going to change a number of the offensive players that we bring in. Remember last year, one of the biggest surprises that we had coming in the offseason is the Giants brought back the entire offensive line as it was. Even though it wasn't great, they went back with Van Roten, Illuminor on one side, JMS in the middle. Runyon was the guard. Thomas was the tackle, although we weren't sure how ready he would be to start the season, but they brought all five back. That's not going to be the case this year. It's pretty obvious. At least Van Roten's, he might come back maybe as a backup down the road. But I don't think so. I don't think the Giants have any interest with a Harbaugh and the way they play. The way Greg Roman has his offensive game plans, the way they do, it's a much more bigger physical kind of thing. And Van Roten just isn't that guy anymore. So I think Illuminor is another one who could be gone. So you're looking at a whole different thing. The offensive coordinator can't really be so involved with all the other pieces when you're really trying to mesh that together. So when you bring in some seriously experienced people, which they have, I think it's huge. Now, game day is where it's going to be interesting how that meshes. But I think leading up to it, I think it's a really good combo because all of these guys have some pretty heavy duty NFL experience. Unlike a bunch of you.
Yeah, that's the thing. The good news is this: they're not old guys. They're really not. It's funny. We're not talking about people in their late 50s and early 60s. These are all still guys, mostly in their 40s, but they have a ton of experience, and they have coached Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. These guys had direct hands on those quarterbacks, and now they're going to all be working with Jaxson Dart. If Jaxson Dart fails here, it's not going to be because he has bad coaching. The guys that are going to be working with have worked with the best quarterbacks in the NFL, right? MVPs. We're talking about MVP level quarterbacks.
Right.
They've worked. Right. The coaching staff, especially with the quarterbacks, is unbelievable because these guys have directly worked. I mean, Matt Nagy was the quarterback's coach on the Chiefs. Brian Callahan was the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator at Cincinnati. And Roman was with Lamar Jackson. So and Harbaugh was with Lamar Jackson. So there are other quarterbacks, by the way, on this list, but those are the three that stick out. So that's it. What's going to be interesting is what you just sort of alluded to, and other people have said, are there going to be too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing? And how does this work? Because some of this is, as Giants fans, we're not used to this. Other teams have had run game coordinators and pass game coordinators. Right. I think last year, Shea Tierney was actually technically the quarterback's coach and pass game coordinator for the New York Giants. We don't really know how that really works, though, I think, as a fan level. How does a running coordinator and a passing coordinator, how does that work with the offensive coordinator? What does that really mean? I'd love to get somebody on here and explain that, because you're seeing that not just only at the pro level now, you're seeing it at the collegiate level. And for me to be on here and say, I know how this is going to work, I don't. I'd be lying to you. I don't know how this is going to work. Other teams are doing it, though, so the Giants aren't doing something that's weird. It's out there, but it is going to be interesting to see how does Bloomgren, the offensive line coach, and Roman sort of interact with the passing game people in terms of formulating a game plan and the blocking schemes and all that, and how does that work? Now, Bloomgren is interesting, and I brought up the post here about Bill Callahan. So some of this stuff, let's not assume people know what we're talking about. Let's take a step back. Greg Roman has been an offensive coordinator in the NFL, and he's been an offensive coordinator in the NFL for both the Harbaughs. And his reputation, justified or not, is he's really, really good with the running game and not so great with the passing game. That he's not very varied. It's too simplistic with the passing game, but he's very good and confuses the hell out of teams with the running game, including the RPO stuff. Not just exclusive to the RPO, but he's really good at that. Bloomgren, the offensive line coach, I want to take a deeper dive in here because he has an unusual path. He worked with the New York Jets and Bill Callahan, which was mentioned earlier. Not Brian, but Bill. Right. Now, for those who don't know, Bill Callahan forever has been considered one of the great offensive line coaches in the NFL. He's been to a bunch of different teams, including the New York Jets, which I'm going to talk about here because Bill Callahan and Bloomgren were both together on the Jets staff, and Bloomgren is a disciple of Bill Callahan. Now, ironically, he's now coaching with Brian Callahan, who is Bill's son. Right. So who's the passing guy. But that's interesting. And so the question here was, did the Giants make a move to get Bill? Well, Brian was one of the last coaches hired. It had been interesting to see if he had been one of the first coaches hired. Would Bill had come here.
Instead of going to Atlanta, he went to Atlanta.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I don't know what the outcome of that would have been. But the thing with Bloomgren, it shows you how sick I am of this. I actually watched a 2011 coaches clinic given by Bloomgren when he was a Stanford coach on offensive line blocking given to other coaches because I wanted to just get a feel for his personality. One of the first things you like this, John, one of the first things he puts up is a quote from Russ Grimm, one of the old Hogs, talking about one of the most satisfying things in the world is to move another person off a spot and basically destroy them, but basically push them off. So he's not into this finesse football. He's into this. We're going to move big men. We're going to have big men move big men away from, and he's also big into even that goes with pass blocking. That pass blocking is inherently passive in that initially you have to retreat. He wants his players to get into it with defenders after that initial retreat. That he doesn't want his offensive linemen playing passively. He wants them getting physical and violent with the people in front of them, even in pass protection. We'll have to see if it plays out. But the thing with Bloomgren is he went on to Stanford as a run game coordinator and offensive line coach, and then the offensive coordinator during a time period when Stanford was known for running the football, not just the running backs, but they put out a bunch of great offensive lines and they beat up on people. And then once he left Stanford, that program kind of fell apart. So while he was there, again, I'm not trying to, Bloomgren to me is one of the big question marks on the staff because after that, he went on to become the head coach at Rice for like 6 or 7 years. And that's like purgatory because Rice is not a big program. But to me, and I think a lot of Giants fans feel like this, the offensive line coach is a huge hire here in terms of will it work out because he's replacing Carmen Brasillo too. It seems that Roman and Brasillo, even though I don't think they've worked together, are going to be on the same page in terms of what they like diverse running attacks and they like to be physical and they like to be more mauling type schemes. And I think they'll be on the same page. I'm just curious to see how that fits in with Nagy and Callahan, even though Callahan's dad was with the Jets with a similar scheme under Rex Ryan and Mangini there too.
So one of the things for me, and I know I keep stating it over and over and over again, so it sounds like it's simplistic, and I guess it is to a degree, but it does mean a lot. It's why some guys are successful at one place and then they go somewhere else and they're not. And that is the scheme that you're going to play. You need to have the players to fit the scheme. One of the things I've complained about, and you've heard me say it. I mean, remember it or not, I'm not sure, but I hate the fact that the Giants, a lot of their run stuff is more that I'm trying to suck you in and we do the delayed draw kind of stuff, kind of drop back and then give the ball. That's a passive running way. It works between the 20s. You can catch teams constantly that way between the 20s. Once you get inside the 20, once you get inside the 10, that shit does not work anymore. There's not enough space on the field. So all of a sudden, when you've got to go big, you've got to go physical, the Giants they don't do it enough to pull it off well, and they struggle. We noticed a big difference when Cam Scatterboo was in because he brings a different mentality, and the Giants would forge ahead. They were going forward, and Scatterboo goes forward. Tyrone Tracy's a different one. They do that passive kind of, and they let him kind of pick and choose. You're going to see I believe you're going to see the Giants get more offensive linemen in the interior spots that are going to be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", that are going to be 330, 340. They're going to have really big offensive linemen, and it's going to be a very physical style of play. That's something, though, that you have to, whatever you're going to coach, those players got to fit it. Because if you don't, if you bring in a real physical coach and you get a bunch of guys who are really good at kind of, passively backing up the block, that run game is going to suck. So I think the matching those two things is hugely important. Are you expecting that Matt Nagy is going to be the play caller?
Yeah, I am, but I'm just curious how all this works. So again, I don't want people to take this as negative. Look, I have faith in Harbaugh, but part of the the objective fan in me still says, how does this work in this sense? So I'm curious. I'm really invested in this because I'm actually as a sort of an outside observer, I'm curious how this is all going to work. What is the identity of this football team going to be? Are we now going to become a run first team, or are we going to be a more of a pass first team? You can't. The coaches are on both sides of the ball. We have both. So this is part of the problem with Nagy. This is what I'm getting at with Nagy. It's a great question, John. So Nagy has been tied to Andy Reid's hip since Philadelphia, except for those 4 years he was in Chicago. He was with him in Philadelphia. He followed him with Kansas City. Andy Reid loves Nagy. Mahomes loves Nagy. A lot of the offensive players seem to like Nagy, especially if you believe that annex Travis Kelce rumor that's out now there on BBI. By the way, thanks for that, Matt, for tweeting that out, because now all the Taylor Swift bots are attacking my account on that. So the problem,
I wouldn't be surprised.
What the problem with figuring out Nagy is Andy Reid has been the play caller in Kansas City. And when Nagy was in Chicago, I can't imagine what it's like. And this isn't to make an excuse for him. Don't take this the wrong way. I can't imagine what it'd be like to be a first-time head coach trying to oversee the whole team and then also being the play caller on offense. I think that's why a lot of these first-time coaches fail. It's almost too much on their plate, especially when your quarterbacks are Trubisky and Justin Fields. We don't know what Nagy really is like, because so much of him is Andy Reid, and we'll have to find out what he is when he's untethered from him, only as an offensive play caller. So I expect him to be off. If he's not the play caller, then I don't know why he's been hired. I expect him to be a play caller. But is he more like Andy Reid, or was he sitting there in Kansas City and going, yeah, I'm a West Coast guy, but I think we should be running the football more. Now, for those who are lamenting not having Monk in here, and I was one of the guys that wanted, and I still wish we had gotten him here because it would have made this more seamless. Monken's big criticism in Baltimore was he didn't feed the ball to Travis Henry enough, and that they lost a number of games last year because they weren't feeding Travis Henry when they had a lead.
You're like 10 years in the past.
Did I get the wrong name?
Yeah, not Travis Henry hasn't been played for a long time.
Yeah, not Travis Henry. What am I talking about? What's his face? Who am I thinking of? Help me out here, John.
Sorry, I'm still laughing. Crap, no, I forgot his name.
Somebody help me out here.
Oh my God. Derrick Henry.
Right,
sorry. It just took me a second because I was laughing so hard. Right. But you said Travis Henry.
Derrick Henry. Sorry, Derrick Henry. Ravens fan. So my nephew is thrilled John Harbaugh got fired from the Ravens. And one of the reasons was like they didn't feed Derrick Henry enough. So again, before we lament the Monken thing too much, that this is offensive coordinators around the NFL. Okay, there's 21 new offensive coordinators in the NFL this year. They're an easy scapegoat. Yeah, we'll have to see how this works out. My big thing is I'm curious to see how this all meshes together. But we probably should move on to the other coaches. Yeah, there's a lot of coaches to go on. So you want to go into running backs real quick?
Yeah, I want to talk. Willie Tiger, who brings head coaching experience from the college level, but he also has a little bit of a skill. Connor brought it up, and I did know this from before, that he was a dual threat quarterback when he was in college. So this is a guy he's used to both the running, the passing game kind of thing, and taking advantage of skill sets like that. I think he's going to be hugely helpful here. I am curious, based on the way the Ravens had their backs set up. Henry was the big back. You could go back before that, and they'd always have one guy who was more of the pounder, and then one was more of a scat or speed back that they used. The Keontae Mitchell guy is one that they use quite a bit. I'm curious if they try to get more, if they're going to go more of a pounder, or if that's going to be Scatterboo. I'm kind of getting the feeling though that Singletary might not be such a good fit in this team the way that it is going forward, because his skill set isn't drastically different than the other backs. They're going to want a back who is different than the others. There's going to be one speed back on this team, and he's not currently there.
Well, what I do think strongly is looking at the profiles of the coaches that we have hired on the offensive side is they're going to throw the football to the backs quite a bit. A lot of that's the West Coast part of it from Callahan and Nagy, but I also think that's just going to be part of the scheme now with even Roman and I guess those three and Tagger. So I would expect, and which is good because both our first string and second string running backs are pass receivers. So Singletary to me is more along the line. Again, we're talking a third string running back here. It comes down to, again, the contract versus is there somebody else on the roster that you can do the job that he does cheaper. I think he's a good guy to have in the locker room. I don't worry about that too much right now. But if somebody comes along who's cheaper and can do the same thing, then I don't think Singletary has much of a future here. But I think our guys, this is, I know people keep bringing this up. I don't discount completely the Giants doing this, but I don't think it's going to happen. There are people that are insistent that this would never happen, and I don't think it will, but it wouldn't completely shock me to my core if on draft night the Giants draft Love. I don't think they're going to do that. I think there's going to be other players there that'll help them. But as I saw somebody the other day, and when you think about it, it's true. Who's the best offensive player in the draft coming up? And it's Love. And when you think of it in those terms, again, you know how I fit with how I stand with Saquon Barkley. I think they should have drafted him when they drafted him. And again, like that team, we've got other needs, but it wouldn't. I don't want to go off on a tangent.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to happen. It wouldn't. I wouldn't be like going, "Oh my God, what are they doing?"
I'll go 99.5%. I'll say it's 100% that they're not going to take Love at 5. It's 99.5% that they won't take him in the top 25. There's just no way. First off, look at the receiving core. We have one legitimate wide receiver right at the moment. We've got.
You don't have to make that argument with me. I agree completely. I'm just saying if you're going to go on value, and I don't think teams do this, but if you're going to go on value, you'd be hard pressed to say Love isn't the best offensive player in this draft.
If you go on value to the team,
yes,
then I disagree, because Dart. You got to get Dart other players, or it's got to be somebody who's going to just elevate the entire team. If you go that route, and with so many other pieces that are necessary to make that one successful, it's the reason why that Barkley, to this day, I will argue this to the end of time, it was the worst pick, period. I don't care that he.
Well, we didn't have a quarterback.
Well, it's not
even have a quarterback.
Yeah. It's not even that. I don't even care about that. You didn't have an offensive line. One position that requires you to have blockers, constant blockers. Quarterbacks can move around and just chuck the ball. Yes, you got to have some guys. They just need to get in the way. Running backs need guys who can actually block, because it takes them time to get the ball and get to the line of scrimmage. We took a guy and he was great for a little while, but he can never elevate the rest of the team. So to me, there's just no way. And look at the Ravens. The only time that they've ever gone out and gotten a back was when they were on the cusp of again going back to the Super Bowl, and that's the free agent signing of Derrick Henry. They haven't drafted running backs high in the draft period.
Right. I don't think it's going to happen. We'll talk about this on a draft show, but I don't think it's going to happen. I wouldn't be shocked. Final thing on Taggart, because we got to get moving, is Ian O'Connor brought up. He's just been tied to the hip of both Harbaugh brothers for much of his career, and they love the guy. So that's why it was always sort of, I didn't know originally when people were saying, like Ian, that it's a shoo-in that Taggart's going to be with the Giants. I was like, why, and now I know they even his father coached him, I think, in college. So
yes.
Harbaugh. So he's just been now. Chad Hall was one of the 3 coaches the Giants kept. He was the assistant quarterbacks coach last year. Before that, he was the wide receivers coach with the Jaguars. He was the wide receivers coach with the Buffalo Bills. He, born in 86, so he's not an old guy. He's played in the league for a bunch of teams. Interesting hire. Mike Groh, who was our wide receivers coach, is still unemployed, even though he has a long history of coaching at different spots, which I find interesting that Mike Groh's still unemployed. So Harbaugh interviewed him, liked what he saw, and he's back. So we'll see. So he, again, assistant quarterbacks coach last year for the Giants under Tierney, and has coaching experience at the wide receiver. So we'll see with him. I don't know if you have anything about Taggart or Hall you want to bring up.
No, we're good.
Okay.
We'll move on.
Tim Kelly is the other guy on offense we brought back. I don't know why. I just get a good feel for Tim Kelly. I like him. When he's interviewed. He's another guy who's been an offensive coordinator in the NFL at 2 spots before he was the interim offensive coordinator with the Giants. I thought he did a nice job with the tight ends last year. If we could just get Theo Johnson to catch the ball, but I think Theo Johnson did improve as a route runner, as a blocker. I think the tight end core was fairly decent. I'm glad he's back. And then we talked about Bloomgren. Again, the thing with Bloomgren, the only thing I will say with him is diverse background with the running stuff. He knows the different styles, the gap schemes, the zone schemes. He believes in being violent, believes in being physical. He believes in getting after it. We'll just have to see with him. That's a big hire. Harbaugh even admitted it in his interview with Gary Myers that was going to be one of his bigger hires. He was out of the limelight when he was at Rice, though. So we'll have to see. In that program did improve while he was there, but it's Rice. There's only so much you can do. So we'll have to see. I think he fits in well with Roman, though. But we'll have to. Right. To me, he's one of the big question marks. So I don't know if you have anything on those guys.
No, I like that. I think it'll be interesting too to see. Newsome has obviously connections to Jim Harbaugh. So being the assistant offensive line coach. I'm curious on your thoughts on the 3 basically quality control offensive guys that we brought in. I don't remember the Giants having more than 1 quality control guy. Maybe
they'll usually have like 2 on each side of the ball. I don't think that's unusual. I'm looking at them real quick because to be honest with you, I didn't take a deep dive on them before this podcast.
No, it's
but one's with the Baltimore Ravens. Oh, one's really Adam Schrack was with him for a long time with the Ravens, even though he's a young guy. So he was with since 2021, even though he was born in 92. So he was there for a while. One thing I have noticed is Harbaugh is very good at identifying young coaches and developing them from the assistant, sort of like just general offensive, defensive assistant, then to the offensive and defensive quality control coach, and then going up the ladder, including the recent Super Bowl coach of the Seattle Seahawks. So don't overestimate or underestimate the ability of John Harbaugh to identify young coaching talent and work with them and promote them through the system, and they become something way more valuable down the line. So that's my only. One of the guys, the other guy, Snyder, came from. He looks like he was with the Houston Texans, and then he was with the Falcons. So I don't know that much about these. The other guy was a football analyst, a very, very young guy, born in '96. That was just a football analyst with the Ravens. I know we're old.
We're getting old, dude.
So let's move on.
But the Schrack one, real quick. The Schrack one, real quick, though, because he was an assistant coach at different levels. What I think is interesting is that he went from special teams coordinator, running backs coach at Notre Dame. He goes up to the NFL and he joins the Raven as a coaching research intern then
Right.
is a coach and is a coaching analyst. So he, to me, seems like, based on that background and being the quality guy, I'm going to assume that he does a lot of stuff around time, challenges, things like that. You're not a coaching analyst unless you're watching and kind of scouting the way that they use timeouts, when they use the timeouts, when they challenge plays, why they challenge plays, when they go for things. And I suspect that's going to be the guy in his ear, either whether on the field or in a box, that's giving him some of that updated real-time information. That way, that seems like the way that he's progressed into that position.
Some of the titles that are being used now are foreign to me, and that's another change with John Harbaugh. Like the term analyst now being used in these coaching bios did not appear on usual Giant coaches in the previous regimes. So we're seeing, I don't know if that's a reflection of the analytics or something else, but we're seeing more terminology that's even different. Again, kind of like the run game coordinator, pass game coordinator thing, but the term analyst appearing to me is interesting because I never saw it before. But if you look at it's over a number of these bios now is, analysts. So on the defensive side, what stands out to me is what I mentioned last time. Except for one coach, it is a very young group. So the offensive side has a lot of experience, but they're not old, but they're not like young 30s. They're not like 34, 35, 36-year-old guys for the most part. The defensive guys, other than Frank Bush, the linebacker coach, the inside linebacker coach, who's like the wily old veteran who's coached guys that when you and I were watching football, he was a player. He was a player down with I think the Houston Oilers. I have to double check that. I think he had a spinal issue that he had to quit the game. Let me see. Yeah, Houston Oilers. He played linebacker back in 85 and 86, John. So we probably saw him when we were like very, very young guys. He's been around a long time. The other guys are very young, and I watched some interviews with them to get a feel for them. And I'll give you an example. The new defensive back coach, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Donald DeLasario, is basically spent the bulk of his coaching career, formative coaching under Spags in Kansas City, which is a good thing because I've always been impressed the way Kansas City defensive backs play. I think that's a good thing for the Giants. He was born in 91, so he's 34 years old. When he started coaching in Kansas City, he was 31, and he's just a very young guy, and he's one of these guys that, again, when you read the articles or hear people talk about him, they see him as one of these guys that has a very bright future in front of him. But he's very young. He's 34 years old, and now he's coaching the defensive backs. His assistant defensive backs coach is Addison Lynch, and he was the cornerbacks coach last year in Denver. And before that, he was the defensive quality control coach in Denver. And I can't find out why Sean Payton let him go. I even went on the boards of the Denver Bronco fans, and they don't know why they let him go, because the corners with Denver played so well. Now, again, they're talented, but there wasn't any there. You know how like on BBI, you have fans, rightly or wrongly, will blame the coaches for a unit not performing well. Well, our offensive line coach sucks because our offensive line stinks. That wasn't true in Denver. So the fans on their boards are even confused on why he wasn't brought back. And Payton did that with like three coaches at the same time. That they're a little confused why Payton let Sean Payton let these guys go. I can't find out why he was let go. He's another young guy who apparently did a good job, but now he's here, and he's the one guy I don't know what happened with his team, but he's here. So I know I'm working backwards, but we'll start with the defensive backs.
It's fine.
I don't know if
it's all good.
Okay. No. And then Frank Bush we covered. He's the wily old veteran. He's been at a ton of places, and he's coached a lot of great middle linebackers. And that that was a good hire for them. I mean, he's the old man in the room, and it'll be interesting to hear him speak. And as far as I can tell, there's no connection with him with the Harbaughs. He's one of those guys that I think he's new to them.
It'll be interesting to see. We know right up the middle in the linebacker position, we have kind of a hole. We have some weaknesses, and Okereke more than likely, at best, he's going to take a massive pay cut. I mean, most likely he's going to get released. So it'll be interesting to see what we bring in, and these veteran coaches. That's another thing about this too. Like lots of times when you get a new staff, you get some veterans and you get a lot of other young guys that come in because you're trying to fill it, especially when across the league there were so many openings. So for the Giants to get as many veteran coaches as they do have a lot of younger guys, but these guys have experience in the league. But they got a lot of, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they have a lot of older, not old, but older experienced coaches that these guys should be able to come in. They're not learning to crawl and then walk. These dudes are coming in, already running.
Right. And I guess we should have started with Denard Wilson, the big guy, the main guy, the defensive coordinator. The one thing I can't figure out, unless somebody else out there can figure out, and I haven't checked the thread, is according to Ian O'Connor, one of the reasons Wilson is here is that Jesse Minter vouched for him. But I can't find, and I asked Grok the same thing, their paths don't appear to have crossed anywhere, that they weren't on the same staff together. Now, they were both in Baltimore at different times, but I can't find where Jesse Minter and Denard Wilson were together. So I don't know if that's accurate about what Ian O'Connor's reporting on that, because I don't get what the connection is. If anything, Harbaugh worked with Denard Wilson in Baltimore, and he would know more about that than Jesse Minter would. But that's me.
That is a weird.
Unless someone can find the connection there.
Yeah.
Someone asked Gronk.
Water with lemon. Water with lemon.
I got beer. Denard Wilson to me is interesting in that he is. This is something Connor Hughes has brought up before and repeatedly, is that there are two coaches on the Giants that he has heard that are future head coaches, and Denard Wilson is one of them, and I think DeLasario is the other. But he said he had talked to two Jets head coaches, and they said, he asked them, is he a future defensive coordinator? And they said he's a future head coach. He's supposedly very, very bright. He's a defensive backs background. So again, hopefully he can reach Deonte Banks. See him at the DeLasario, but we'll see. And Addison Lynch. But to me, he's one of the interesting hires in that I think other Giants fans expected Harbaugh to go in a different direction than he did, but in his tenure in Tennessee was marked with a really good first year on defense and a not so great second year, but on a defense that was devoid of talent, both through injury and them getting rid of players.
Right.
And they played above their heads from what I've seen from Tennessee Titan reporters, saying they were really well coached and they played about as hard as they could given what they had there. And that the same people said he'll probably be in hog heaven here, given the fact that he's got Abdul Carter and Brian Burns coming off the edge compared to what he had when he was in Tennessee. So hopeful, but again, a very young guy. Got another guy like Nagy that some Giants fans are like, really, Tennessee? Couldn't we have done better than that? But he was with Harbaugh in Baltimore, and he has experience with him there when he was a defensive backs coach. So the second guy that also came from Baltimore is Dennis Johnson. To me, he's one of the more interesting guys because Andre Patterson, one of the things that he used to like to tell everybody, and love him or hate him, Andre Patterson's the one who got Dexter Lawrence to become a different player. but one of the things he would tell people is, I coach defensive linemen differently than everybody else. I teach them different techniques than everybody else because I'm better at it than everybody else. He had an ego. Andre Patterson did. He would tell people, he would say, I can get more out of every player because I know because I'm better at my job. So now comes in
our run defense proved that.
Right. Well, and now comes in Dennis Johnson, and does he have to break those habits that are now that Andre Patterson taught? And the one thing about Dennis Johnson is Andre Patterson was an old coach near the end of the line, had health issues. Didn't he have cancer? Did he have cancer?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, he had cancer. He had health issues. Dennis Johnson is the opposite. He's a young guy. He's really in shape. He's a guy that you will hear at training camp yelling and hollering like crazy. He's an old school. He's a young guy, but he's an old school in the way that he gets down with the linemen, and he'll get down with the blocking sleds, and he'll get in their faces, and he's that kind of guy. So it's a different thing. He's going to be one of the guys in this, but he's a young, vocal. So to me, he's one of, like the offensive line, the defensive line coach is one of the more interesting ones. But again, Harbaugh has experience with him because he was with the Ravens, but he's another young guy.
Yep.
And so on offense, young guys other than Frank Bush, offensive guys, way more experience.
Sure.
They're not old, but just way more experience.
So Dennis Johnson's going to get down with the OPP. He didn't, but he's not bringing Mikhail Burton Parrish with him. So we're gonna have to see how Dennis Johnson plays out. Yeah, it's a little basketball reference. Sorry, going more school.
John Schmelk did the same thing.
Did he really? I didn't see that, but
yeah, John Schmelk brought up Dennis Johnson, of basketball fame.
Nice,
too, as well.
nice.
Yes.
It'd be the one thing about the defensive line thing. I don't know that it's going to be that big of a deal, especially if, and this is really going to be for a conversation later this week when we have Sion, Dave Syvertson of Our Lad Scouting is going to be with us on Thursday. When we talk about the team and we talk about some free agency, we talk about the draft, we'll be able to talk to him about that. If the Giants move on from the Dexter Lawrence, but let's say even if they don't, they're probably going to change out some of the other players. I don't know that Nunez Roches is going to make his way back to this team.
Right.
He doesn't fit the mold of at least what the Ravens would have.
It doesn't fit the Ravens mold to me. Yeah.
Roy Robinson Smith, I don't know that he's going to be there. I don't know that that's a guy, that fits that either. DJ Davidson's coming off injury. I don't know where he's at contract wise.
Yeah, he's a free agent.
So there's going to be, I think in many ways, I would look at Tennessee. I would look at Baltimore. I would look at guys who have fit that role that the Giants might be bringing in to play that role. And then the big question becomes, is Dexter even part of that group? Because he's the one guy, when you talked in the beginning about that conditioning thing, Dexter has
thought about that.
He has struggled the last couple of years. He comes in pretty heavy, and that's fine. That was needed for that. But you still have to be able to play. The Ravens had really big nose tackles. They obviously were able to pass the specific test they were doing. But, Dexter's had it a little bit easy, to be quite frank, over the last couple of years. He's battled injury, but we'll see where that plays out. But I think that defensive line coach is going to have a bunch of new parts that he's going to be coaching.
I think it's funny on X right now is you've got battling asshats. Somebody's out there saying, "Oh, Dexter's on the trading block," and then somebody else who's also supposing the asshat is saying, "No, he's not on the trading block. Kayvon is, but not Dexter." So again, we're gonna have to be very careful with X with this stuff now, because there's people out there pretending to be things that they're not, knowing things. Maybe the Giants do have some of these guys on the trading block right now, but I don't think anybody on X probably knows what John Harbaugh is thinking right now.
I suspect there was one report that said the Giants were fielding calls. That doesn't necessarily mean you sent out like flyers to teams going, "Hey, give us a call." That very well could be people are reaching out. It's not hard to pinpoint where the Giants might want to make some maneuvers. One, Kayvon has 1 year left on the contract, and he's pretty expensive. If the Giants move him, they gain a ton of cap space. That's not hard to draw a line there that says, hey, they might be interested in moving him. Dexter is the next biggest contract, really, though, that the Giants could do something with, and that's either they've got to give him a new one, either extend the one they got or give him a whole new one, or they're moving on from him. So again, you might not have any inside information. You're just going, well, that kind of makes sense.
Well, that's what I was just going to say, John. So say your intent was to set up an X account where you pretended to be an insider, but you had to put out information that made you sound like an insider. That's the kind of information you'd put out there because it sounds believable. So that there are a couple of guys on that are on, like that angry insider guy that we talked about. His magic ran out, because he was saying things that seemed likely, but they didn't happen. So anyways, so all I'm saying is be careful what you're reading on X right now, because I'm sure we're going to hear all kinds of stuff. Last thing on special teams, it's very clear to me, it's obvious. So this is stating the obvious that Horton, the special teams coach, was one of Harbaugh's big gets. He wanted him. He made him assistant head coach, according to one of the interviews. It might have been the Ian O'Connor. What was one of the interviews I saw that they felt, I think it was Ian O'Connor. He felt that he does have, Harbaugh thinks he's a future head coach, Horton. And he's been with Harbaugh forever in Baltimore. What's interesting is that the assistant head coach he brought with him is a guy, and it looks like Weist, but I think it's pronounced Weist.
I think it's Weist.
Was out of football for 2 years. It's wrong on Wikipedia. He was out of football for 2 years. He's an older guy. He doesn't look his age, but he's an older guy. He's was born in 1965. Christ, he's older than me now. And he was with Baltimore last in 2023 as a special teams coach under Horton. So he knows Horton. Again, I looked into it. He wasn't fired. I don't know why he was out of football for the last 2 years. I don't know if it was a health-related fething or they felt like to go in a different direction, but they brought him back. So he was the other guy other than the Addison Lynch guy with Denver. I don't really know what the backstory is, even though I've tried to find out why he was let go by the team. And so, but the good news is he's got experience with them. The guy that was on with John Schmelk with the Ravens said there was a coach with the Ravens under Horton that specifically worked with kickers. And I'm thinking, of course, of Gano here and Jamie Gillen. What are their futures here? And that guy chose to stay with the Ravens, which Schmelk brought up the question. I wonder who's going to handle that here with the Giants. I don't know if Weist has that kind of experience or not, but I'm very curious to see how John Harbaugh, the special teams coach, handles our kickers this year. Are those guys back or are they gone? I mean, is Gillen here? Is Fano? I mean, is Gano here? I don't know.
Well, Graham should know that he is Gano because he's not coming back. I mean, you're not spending millions.
You don't think? I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so, but who knows? I don't want to say something and say, well, Eric said he was going to be gone. I don't want to say that.
I'll say it. He's gone. They're not.
I don't think the Giants are going to draft Love, but they could.
They need salary cap space. You're not bringing back a kicker who has a real problem with even being available, let alone making the kicks.
Yeah. And last thing before we get off, and I don't know if you have final thoughts, the training staff, they ended up keeping 5 guys. They got rid of one and they brought on two new guys. And not including the nutrition specialist who stayed as well too, because I don't consider that he's part of the performance staff, but he's not part of the weight and conditioning staff. But I thought they'd make more changes there than they did. But he seems to be pretty happy with the crowd they had. There was one guy that is gone, and there are 2, but they did rearrange titles, and one of the Ravens guys does seem to have replaced one of the Giants guys up the pecking order in terms of the strength coach. The overall guy is still the guy that was here the last 2 years with the Giants, Aaron Wellman, who most people at the time when we brought him back, a lot of people were glad. Giants fans were glad because he had a good reputation. He has spent 2 stints with the Giants. One during, I have to bring it up. One during a period when the team was doing well. And most Giants fans were glad that Wellman came back. And Harbaugh looked at him and decided to keep him. So Wellman's still in charge. There was some tinkering, but not a major, like, we're going to sweep the strength and conditioning coach staff.
He was here 2016 to 2019. So the only year there would have been 2016.
16, I guess. Yeah.
But hey, it was a great year.
People are remembering 2016 as the fond years now.
Just 22, 16,
22.
you know, it's
Though
great.
it is interesting in the Ian O'Connor interview that Ian O'Connor on the podcast did say what you and I have said, that the Giants viewed that 2022 was actually a bad year in hindsight because it created a mess for them for obvious reasons. The whole, you and I have talked about it, the contract situation.
I think, you know, honestly, the most obvious thing that it did there, forget the contracts, forget that piece of it. If you stick to just Shane and Dayball, I think it went to their heads. I think they arrived. They were the kings of the town. See, that's the other part. The one thing, and to kind of full circle back to where we were, the interview with Ian O'Connor, where he talked about the conversation with Harbaugh about wanting to bring a championship here, and then asking him how it would feel, and he pumped the brakes on that, and he said, "I don't really want to think about how it would feel because we haven't done anything yet. You know, I don't want to get ahead of me." He goes, "I'm not going back on what I said. It's just," and it's that to me is a guy who knows the difference between I expect us to win and here's the process to win versus I expect us to win and let me dream about the parade. That's, you haven't done anything yet. You've made a statement that you want to get there. And you could see it with Dayball and Shane. They really came off that season. It was like there was some talk that made it sound like, you know, we still got work to do, but the way they behaved acted like they were here. Like they thought they had it and they just had to pull some pieces together. And instead of seeing what they saw leading into the season, which is we have a flawed quarterback that we're going to work around some, and they did. They worked around him. They were able to maximize that combination of Barkley Jones, but neither one of them by themselves was a difference maker for the team. They had to be together. And then they were like, "Oh, let's go get these pieces for Daniel Jones," and right from there, and there was just some arrogance, you know, just some arrogance overall, and watching all that kind of play out. So to me, that's where that was. And Harbaugh's not going to be I have 1 year of success and the whole world is just going to change for me. He expects to succeed. Anything below that is going to be a bit of a slap in the face.
Well, he knows how to do it. That's the thing that Ian O'Connor was talking about too. And again, so there are going to be Giants fans out there going, "Why are you guys deifying Harbaugh here?" And I'm not trying to deify him. It's just he's the adult in the room now that knows how to do it. That doesn't mean he's going to be successful here, but he knows how to be successful. And the other guys, you know, push came to shove, they were pretenders. And John, they made a catastrophic decision on the quarterback position with Daniel Jones, but they also made catastrophic decisions on the offensive line. The offensive line for 3 of the 4 years was a mess, and they gambled on players like Shane Lemieux and Evan Neal and Zudu and, you know, these guys that Glowinski and all these guys that it didn't work out, and they botched the offensive line. They made a horrible decision to re-sign Daniel Jones, even though they did not give him the 5th year. And as you have brought up repeatedly, they weren't ready to start the season. They just they weren't prepared, and they got themselves behind the 8 ball from the very beginning, and they were playing catch up the whole time, and it would spiral out of control. And then the injuries mounted, and we were out of it by Halloween every year, and then that's why they were let go, because they weren't good. This is what bothers me with when I do see people trying to defend not just them but other previous regimes and players. They weren't good at what they did. No. And don't bitch about how bad the Giants are, but then you're like lamenting them getting rid of the guys that caused the problems. And we have people on BBI and then social media who are like, "Why do the Giants stink? I can't stand it. They're awful. Oh, by the way, I don't want to get rid of this person who caused the problem in the first place." And it's like, I don't understand that thinking. Again, you can go too much the other way. You've smartly brought it up a lot of times that the Giants sometimes have been too reactive in listening to the fan base. But the fans have largely been ahead of the ownership on a lot of this stuff in terms of we knew our defensive coordinator sucked. You know, that kind of thing. We knew the Saquon Barkley thing wasn't going to end well.
Look at his defenses. Look at what he did.
I mean, there are things that Giants fans have gotten right, and then you've got the Bob Papas of the world mocking us, saying, "Oh, you guys don't know what you're talking about." And I could create a list. That's just the one that immediately came to mind. But there's a whole thing that we were told, "All right, barbarians, peons, you don't know what you're talking about." But, and again, you've mentioned it before. We love Carl Banks, but Carl. We know what good run defense looks like. You were part of it. Don't tell us Deonte Banks knows what he's doing. He doesn't. Anyways, all right.
No. Can you just real quick? Can you imagine Deonte Banks and the way he's played? Right, the stuff he's shown on the field, the running alongside somebody and not even trying to make a tackle, being on the 86.
No. Remember, what was the corner that we had that they used to throw in the ice and he got was it Eli Apple or who was it?
Was it Prince of Mukamara?
Mukamara, wasn't it? Or whoever it was.
I'm pretty sure
he would have been the guy that got thrown in the ice tub going, all right,
tape to the goalpost.
Yeah.
Tape to the goalpost.
No, I can't even imagine what George Martin, Harry Carson, Lawrence Taylor, Leonard Marshall Carl Banks would have done to Deonte Banks after seeing him play run defense. Just like you said, running alongside. Hi.
He's like pacing the guy.
Yeah. Hi. And the funny thing is the guy he replaced, Adoree Jackson, was the same thing. He was like all business decisions. So I don't know. He did that in Philadelphia too. Philly got to learn what we already knew. I don't know if you saw Philadelphia fan reaction to Adoree Jackson, but they had enough of him too. So
Jesus, it's amazing to me. Anyway, the fact that dude made it another you and I debated during the Buffalo preseason game. I was all over him, and then by like October, you're kind of like,
oh yeah, I was done. As I
said,
said, good year. So I shouldn't say good. Decent rookie year, horrible second year. I said third year's tiebreaker, and the same with Jalen Hyatt. And you were right on both of them. But I gave him. I said, give me one more year on both of them. And Jalen, I was even out sooner than Deonte, and both of them were awful. If Jalen is anywhere near this team in this upcoming year, I'm going to pull my hair out. It's going to be like, Jalen's awful.
That would be shocking. That would be shocking at this point. So, all right, with that, I think we'll kind of, unless you got something else, I think we'll wrap it up here. We have Thursday Size coming on, so we're not going to do that one live because it's just easier. It's hard to pay attention to all the questions popping in. If you want to post some in BBI, bigblueinteractive.com, I can't guarantee we'll get to all of them because we do have things we want to talk with Cy about, but we'll try to. But it's just easier if we record it and I'll post it. Someone asked the question, when will you post it? My plan is as soon as I finish it, I'm going to run it as if we were running it live so I don't have to process it after the fact. I just need it to upload and then I'll turn around, add it to YouTube, and it'll be good to go. So I would suspect we'll finish it, and within 45 minutes, it'll be available to everybody else. So
right, and we're planning to record it with him around 6:15.
I believe so. I think so. Yes.
So it should be up by 8, right?
I would think so, assuming we keep it for an hour because that's what he's kind of given us.
He said he can't do more than an hour.
So I would say by 8 p.m. Eastern time, it will be available Thursday night.
Yeah, he's slammed for obvious reason. The combine's coming up for him too, so he's slammed right now. So
he's got a lot of CrossFit stuff, and his kids in wrestling and all that stuff. So good for him. So with all that stuff, we are going to call it here, and like, subscribe, please, all that good stuff. We're growing. We're well over 1,700 subscribers. So keep going. We're having a lot of fun with this, and we'll see you again this Thursday.
Get your Inside BBI merch here.
Thank you.